Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farhan Patafi. Today we are going to talk about Pakistan's defense. And my guest, the only guest that I have in the studio right now, is an intellectual, a thinking man, but he is also the defense minister of Pakistan. And we are going to talk about the full range of issues that are actually concerning Pakistan, at times troubling as well. Pakistan's military diplomacy as well, Pakistan's relations with its neighbors, Pakistan's cooperation in the war on terror, umpteen other issues. The guest that I have in the studio is, of course, Engineer Khurram Dastgir Khan Saab, the Defense Minister of Pakistan. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program.
Delighted.
Sir, let me start with India-Pakistan relationship, because the Indian pressure on LOC doesn't seem to go away. Every time we talk about anything at all, we are told that we have limited options. All we can do is engage them there and just wait for them to tire down. Do we have any other options at all?
Well, we are short of options at the moment because you see, India is purposely raising the threshold while remaining under what we call the nuclear or war umbrella. So they want to raise it as much as they can because they're building up through this drastic escalation on the line of control. In 2017, there were more than 1,900 violations. There are already nearly 400 violations this year in the 2 months that have passed. Is that they're trying to establish two things. First of all, their narrative is that they don't fire at Pakistan, they fire at incursions across the border.
Right.
And the second thing is, by raising the tension on the line of control, of course, they want to deflect attention away from the very real political move that is happening in the occupied Azad Jammu and Kashmir, right, in which they are essentially trying to suppress what is now established as an indigenous protest, an indigenous struggle against Indian rule, and very draconian laws. The conduct of their armed forces is reprehensible in terms of, we have seen, or the whole world has now seen, the pictures of our Kashmiri brothers and sisters who have been hit by pellets. But we usually see faces. There have been more drastic cases of people being hit all through their bodies. Their bodies have been essentially smashed by pellets.
Absolutely.
So it's horrendous. And of course, the previous groove of human rights violations, in which there were, essentially rape as an instrument of war. Right. We have seen mass killings, mass graves, detentions, forced disappearances. So that too continues, and pellets are a sort of new addition.
They are not only raising the threshold outside, India, especially on India-Pakistan, LOC, but they are also raising it in Kashmir. But you said that the world has seen the pictures. The world sees everything, but it seldom hears the shrieks of Kashmiri people. And it seems that they are totally devoid of speech.
Well, the lesson for us is that Pakistan too needs a period of political stability in which we also can achieve 7% plus GDP growth rates.
Right. We don't have stability right now?
We don't have stability right now.
We have an elected government?
We have an elected government, but there are all what I keep saying is, quoting Ahmed Faraz's famous poem Mahasra, that the siege of democracy continues.
Right.
So democracy continues, but the siege also continues.
So you foresee a future where that siege won't be there?
Well, it will require collective political wisdom. We got nearer to it in 2006 when we did the Charter of Democracy between the late Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif.
Right.
But we have sort of backpedaled again because I think the requirements of power and the lust for power tends to overwhelm the respect for democracy. But then we are digressing.
Right.
So the Indian issue...
We are not digressing because there is one word that we used before starting this program. It was the quality or the nature of entropy. And somehow, looking at the Americans, looking at so many other democratic governments, one feels that that kind of siege will always be there elsewhere as well. So whatever we have to do, if we have to enhance our clout internationally, we'll have to do it under the same similar circumstances.
Absolutely, that's the challenge. That we raise our clout. That we, I think just yesterday there was a meeting of the National Security Committee,
Right.
in which I participated also, and there was this sentence of recalibrating Pakistan's policy regionally. It's just that for most of our existence, we essentially have been looking for patrons. So first it was, at the very beginning, it was the United Kingdom, then we shifted to the United States, we went into alliances with them, we fought the first Afghan war with them at great cost to ourselves, a cost that we continue to pay to this day.
Right.
So it's this, and now you see that it's happening in some extent with China. The thing is, we have to be more agnostic in our foreign policy,
Right.
and to see wherever we can find friends. There are no permanent friends and enemies in international
There
arena.
should be permanent friends, not permanent enemies.
Well, yes, there should be permanent friends. I
Right.
think we have been able to achieve that with, to a large extent with China,
And
with,
we are
with
going to talk
Turkey.
about China because China has become a
But
very major
let me
issue.
conclude on India. So this,
Yeah, LOC especially, how can we increase or diversify the options that we have?
the way is, I think one of the major tasks before the next government to be elected by the people of Pakistan this summer is to very seriously enhance the capacity and size of our diplomatic force and the kind of diplomacy we do.
Right.
So it's not just in the diplomatic missions. It has to go out in international media. It has to go out to international think tanks, and not just in the West. That's why I call it recalibrating.
Right.
It has to go equally well in China, in Russia, in Europe, and of course the United States.
Not in India?
Well, in India too. Why not?
Because you were talking about recalibration,
Yeah.
so the word that came to my mind was lobbying. Can we lobby within India as well?
Or why not? But the way to lobby with India would be something that we again came closer to in the earlier part of this government, and then we have unfortunately retreated, is to have normal economic relations with them, and to have a sizable, well, not group, but a sizable sector of the economy which has stakes in Pakistan, which would then automatically press upon the Indian government that this any kind of warmongering is bad for their interests.
Yeah.
This was
But
essentially. This was
you're
essentially-
talking about the macro influence, right? I was talking about the micro one, where you actually approach politicians, where lobbyists actually go there and push, create some kind of influence, and then through that they actually influence their
Well,
government.
I have been, as a member of the opposition in 2008 to 13, part of Track 2 dialogues. I visited India twice, once as a co-chair of the parliamentary dialogue. And the truth is that whatever animosity is there in India against Pakistan is largely a Delhi and North India phenomena. The rest of the India is not really bothered about Pakistan. We met their elected representatives, we met their members of Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, and they sort of look at it with sort of quizzical eye, and they said, well, yeah, Pakistan, people tell us it's our enemy, but they
are not.
Yeah.
Might not be.
Might not
but that there lies the strength of possibility. We can always influence them. We can always try to build bridges with such people and create a pressure within India that influences. But
that's the challenge. That's why I'm saying that it's not just the missions anymore. You have to really spread out your diplomatic footprint in the economy, in diplomacy, in think tanks, whatever your countries of interest are, of course very respectfully, but you have to approach different regions of that country, talk to people more and more. So this will require, as I said, a much greater effort. And of course, the thing is, it will require more resources and more human resources to be able to achieve what Pakistan needs to achieve. We've had a terrible decade, nearly 2 decades now, of Pakistan being demonized as a haven of terrorists. And it's something that we have to make an extraordinary effort
Actually,
to counteract.
you are stealing my questions right now. I have to ask you a lot of others. One last question about India, and then we move on to the whole spectrum of other things. India, do you, as Defense Minister of Pakistan, foresee a future, a possible future, where India and Pakistan are not only not enemies, but friends?
Yes, I can envision such a future, but for that will require tremendous political courage,
Right.
which
Only on our behalf or
on
Indian?
both sides.
Right.
Because you see, when Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif went to Prime Minister Modi's oath-taking ceremony, he did demonstrate that kind of political courage. But it was, unfortunately, not reciprocated.
Right. And
so
it
that
badly damaged him
and
within Pakistan.
it damaged him badly domestically. So the thing is, it requires great courage, requires great vision that this needless hostile groove that we have fallen into, we need to come out of.
Right. Now, let us talk about this image of Pakistan as haven of terrorism. We have had a lot of friends. We have worked very closely with America for 15, 16 years. And today they are actually chastising us. The focus remains on Afghanistan. Today, Ashraf Ghani has invited Taliban also to join the peace process. But the essential question about, or the allegation remains that there are safe havens for Haqqani network and Afghan Taliban within Pakistan. What do you have to say on that?
Well, Pakistan is the same. In the first Afghan war, it was the refuge of the Mujahideen.
It was.
The eyes changed and became haven of terrorists. Mujahideen became terrorists.
Right.
And the refuge and the staging ground which the United States and the West used in its war against the Soviet Union in Afghanistan became a haven.
Right.
So Pakistan is essentially the same. And in fact, Pakistan, there are no two questions about it, no two opinions about it, is that Pakistan has suffered the most grievously as a consequence of Western policies in this region in the first Afghan war. And essentially, instead of taking the blame themselves, they blamed their whole mistake of first fomenting a jihad in the first Afghan war, and then when jihad turned against them, then they said, oh, Pakistan is haven. Pakistan...
But we were willing partners, were we not?
We were willing partners, yes.
So while we are holding them accountable, we have to actually go back in history and hold ourselves accountable.
Yes, I think there are two lessons that I have learned as an elected representative and now a person in government. First of all, in the 21st century, you cannot leave any area of your country ungoverned.
Right.
No ungoverned space can now exist in the 21st century because not just other governments, but the terrorist forces or extremists are also actively searching for ungoverned spaces across the world. And they will go there.
Right.
So the first duty is ungoverned spaces cannot be allowed.
Right.
We allowed FATA to be an ungoverned space for 70 years. It is no longer tenable. I'm delighted that in this government we are making some progress in shifting it from being ungoverned to properly governed.
Right.
The second lesson that I've learned is that no matter how attractive it may seem temporarily, one cannot have armed militias supported by the state.
Right.
At any time, anywhere.
Even tolerated by the state as well?
Yes, and that is simply not, it is not tenable because
So,
as Max Weber said long ago, the monopoly on legitimate violence must remain with the state.
yeah, Max Weber actually said that, but the problem is maybe many of us have actually forgotten that message. Let us talk about ungoverned spaces. Do you think there are ungoverned spaces still in Pakistan?
No, I would not say that. There are little pockets, you could say. which we are slowly now eliminating.
Right.
The very recent operation that did that was Khyber 4 last summer in Khyber Agency,
Right.
also
Bordering Afghanistan.
in Tira Valley.
Tira Valley.
So we are slowly eliminating those spaces. And then, of course, there is also this issue of the vast emptiness of Balochistan, which we, again, a very serious issue for our successors in government to think about is how to ensure that Balochistan is governed, secured, policed properly.
Right.
So it's
That is saying something because Balochistan is 44% of Pakistan's territory.
yes.
And it becomes quite a humongous task. Do we have that kind of resources at this moment?
Not at this moment, but it's something that we have to make a start at.
Right.
And again, as I said, to make sure that whole of Pakistan is governed, and I think provinces will have to take equal responsibility with the federal government to ensure that whole of Pakistan, at least in terms of security, is governed by the same laws.
Do we have that kind of consensus for that? Because in FATA, we didn't see that.
No, we don't have consensus because unfortunately, we are not even articulating what is required.
Right.
I think in so many ways, the public discourse and what we see on the electronic media each night from 7 to midnight, the discourse has been thoroughly not only poisoned, but distorted.
Right.
And to be able to say what really needs to be done, yes, every important thing that needs to be done is difficult. It will anger some people because it will somehow break the status quo that certain people are making money out of, taking advantage of. So, but of course, these are the serious long-term issues. Right. And the only one thing I want to say is, the only thing I can say this now is that in Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif's leadership, we were able to resolve the two greatest issues that faced us when we came into government, which were energy shortages and terrorism. Right. It's only now that we are through those serious issues is now that we can think about Balochistan and ungoverned spaces and to ensure how we are going to go forward in terms of diplomacy across the world.
Right. And you have to aggressively advocate for that because you are the government, right?
Yes.
That should happen. But here's the problem. One is internal advocacy. One is international advocacy. Pakistan is repeatedly accused of Haqqani network and their presence. And somehow whatever we say is not heard by the West. I'm going to take your answer, sir, but we have to take a small break. When we come back, we'll continue this discussion. Welcome back. Before going to the break, we were discussing Pakistan's defense and security policy with Defense Minister of Pakistan. Let me resume from where I left. Khurram sir, we were talking about Haqqani network and the way repeatedly that is used to, poison international space against Pakistan, international opinion against Pakistan. If there is any Haqqani network member in Pakistan, shouldn't we be exposing them? If they are not here, why are we failing to convince the world?
Well, Haqqani network no longer exists in Pakistan.
Right. Okay.
I'm making this categorical statement. Right. There are remnants of their sympathizers, which are spread across the country in different refugee settlements, in different urban areas. And that is why we succeeded after Zarbiyaz in beginning Raddul Fasad, which is weeding out these people who are in very small numbers. So there are 2, 3, 4, 5, to that kind of strength.
Yeah, but high profile sympathizers or low profile?
Low profile sympathizers. And you see, essentially the US rhetoric hasn't changed since 2009. Former Secretary of State Clinton came and she said Haqqani Shura, there's a Quetta Shura, and lo and behold, 8 years later, it's again in 2017, again it's Quetta Shura. The truth is that the United States should be worried about the Helmand Shura. Because their own estimates, and I've said this repeatedly, the Special Inspector General for Afghan Reconstruction has clearly said that 43.2% of Afghanistan is outside the influence or control of the Afghan government.
Yeah. Today, they
So
actually
half of
talk about
Afghanistan-
even Kabul. I mean, you must have seen CBS interview in which Ashraf Ghani Sahab himself is actually confessing that within months, the government can fall if the US actually withdraws their support.
Yes. So essentially, half of Afghanistan, even if we are being very optimistic, is a safe haven. So it's that you should be worried about. The reason that we say that our narrative is not being accepted is psychological, and it is this great power, the United States, supported by many Western countries, reaching the same stage which they did in early 70s, in which they were in denial about their defeat in Vietnam. And many things had to happen, principally the Pentagon Papers, to actually tell the American people that they had lost the war. They had already lost the war. It took them another 3 years to actually pull out. Here, those kind of Pentagon Papers are not coming out yet, but they will. The Americans have
Even
lost,
in the age of Wikipedia,
even in the age of Wikipedia, it is actually this denial of their tremendous defeat in Afghanistan after waging the longest war in US history. It's the longest war. It is longer than any world war. It's been longer than the Vietnam War. It's been longer than the Philippine War that they fought in the early 20th century. It has been their greatest military endeavor, and they have failed. And it is that denial which actually Nadia Shadlow has written about, the American denial syndrome, is that they are refusing to accept. And it's this, they're pegging their failure on Pakistan, and the Haqqanis are their favorite.
Let us assume that someday they overcome this denial. So what comes next? Do we have a clear, positive outcome possible at all?
A clear, positive outcome is possible, and
what is that?
I'm glad to see, despite some differences with the papers that were presented in Kabul at the peace conference, at least some reality is beginning to reach Kabul. And that's why you saw that, finally the Afghan president saying that we will talk to the Taliban. The Taliban are a political group. It is something that Pakistan has been quietly telling the Afghans and the Americans and the Europeans for a long time.
Since there's a reason why I asked you this question. Because at that time when they were formulating the South Asia policy, there were 3 possible outcomes at that time as suggestions. Status quo, that they have actually stuck with right now. Second, total pullout, where their presence is replaced by other regional powers, maybe India. And the third one was a partial withdrawal, in which Blackwater and people similar to that, Eric Prince's supporters, contractors, but Eric Prince especially because he was the advocate.
Mercenaries.
They end up there. Is it not lose-lose for us?
Well, it is not lose-lose for us. Thing is, we are advocating, and we say this very clearly, that a peaceful, stable, democratic Afghanistan is one of the highest priorities of our foreign policy. We want a peaceful Afghanistan. We want a democratic Afghanistan. And, as we keep saying, it must be Afghan-owned and Afghan-led. So what has happened in the peace conference in Kabul in the last 2 days, very interestingly, completely undermines the South Asia policy announced by the United States in August last year. Because then President Trump was very pithy, and he said, we are not going to do nation building, we are going to kill terrorists. Now suddenly it's the Afghan government saying they are not terrorists, they're people we have to talk to. Because again, that policy perhaps has been tried. They did try bombing Afghanistan in the last 7 months, sometimes massively through the mother of all bombs, if you remember. next to the Pakistan border. But what has happened is, we must learn truth from facts, all of us. And the fact is that despite massive bombing, more and more Afghanistan has slipped out of the US and Afghan government's hands. And that has happened in the last 7 months since the US South Asia policy was announced. Because interestingly, the 43.2% figure by the Special Inspector General was the one announced at the end of October 2017.
Right.
In January 2018, the Special Inspector General was asked to withhold that information.
Yeah,
so they left it blank in their report.
Yeah, but Sigar has also pointed out the inherent corruption in Afghanistan.
Absolutely.
And then the people who have stakes in the war economy and the smuggling economy.
Absolutely. I think Sigar has been quite realistic.
So do you think these two things, war economy and, this drug trade economy, it ends on the border?
Well, it not only ends in the border, it ends inside Pakistan. It creates violence in Pakistan. It creates criminal groups. Interestingly, last year, the United Nations says that 2017 was the year of highest poppy production ever in Afghanistan. Naturally, it's going to have effects in Pakistan. Some of it passes through Pakistan on its way to the rest of the world. Now, something that is happening in Afghanistan that is actually the cause of criminal activity, then the Afghan government turns around and says Pakistan has criminal gangs and we have to deal with them because the criminal gangs are there because of the massive poppy production on Afghan soil.
Right.
So we are in sort of a very schizophrenic situation in which the United States is simultaneously, and the Afghan government, they accuse us of incursions.
And they praise us also?
No,
not at
they
all.
don't support the fence that we are putting across the border.
Yeah, and
they don't like that fence. So you can't have it both ways.
Right.
Because if you're really serious about stopping incursions, then you have to support Pakistan's fence.
Yeah, it might
which
be,
of course is going to cost almost nothing compared to the wall President Trump is proposing across the Mexican border.
Exactly. But we are going to talk about the fence as well because that is very important. It seems that there is tolerance of that concept now in Afghanistan. In the past, we saw that whenever we installed biometric, pickets there, they were actually attacked by the Afghan side. Now there seems to be some kind of tolerance. But you said that some part of smuggling might go through Pakistan as well. So are you not saying that there are ungoverned spaces?
That's why I mentioned Balochistan, because that's precisely where those drugs are passing across.
Okay.
And that's why it is a massive challenge. The vast empty spaces, particularly the west of Quetta until the Iranian border is that vast emptiness. I've actually flown over it and seen it personally. So that's a challenge.
I've actually driven across.
You've driven across 640 kilometers. Again, a challenge. So that's what the fence is going to do, because as the fence goes, we are also concurrently creating posts also.
Right.
After
and we are raising new FC units as well.
We are raising FC. So essentially, sooner or later, we will have all 2,600 kilometers of Pak-Afghan border fenced.
Okay, that is amazing because you're comparing it with America-Mexico border. So President Trump has repeatedly said that Mexico is going to pay for it. Are we talking about the cost of Pakistan-Afghan border fence as well, and who's going to pay for it?
No, we are not talking. But the cost, the reason I mentioned the cost is because there are still 3 million plus Afghan refugees in Pakistan, which the United States and Afghanistan have practically abandoned as Pakistan's problem. Whenever we speak to our Afghan brothers, our counterparts in government, they say we need more time. We need 18 months, we need 30 months, whatever months. Don't send them back, please. The international community has also abandoned them. And so it has become, and we have shouldered that responsibility already for nearly 40 years. And the cost that we have paid, not only in direct dollars and cents, but also its effects on Pakistani society, its effects on our ethnic balances in certain provinces. It's been an issue. So we have paid dearly for this.
Right.
And the reason I say is that we would very much like those our guests that we have here, our Afghan brothers and sisters, to return to their country with dignity, with some measure, we hope, of economic security. But ultimately, they are citizens of another country.
Right.
And they have to go back.
Exactly.
But the thing is, the same United States who refuses to accept refugees, who is putting up a wall to stop Mexicans from entering their country, is asking us to maintain 3 million refugees
Right.
on our soil.
That's an
another
irony.
dichotomy.
That is an irony. But repeatedly you have mentioned cigar reports, right? That is what democracies actually do. They produce data and literature that is helpful to assess what is going wrong. If they are stubbed, like Pentagon Papers, they are somehow at WikiLeaks, they are. In Pakistan, it seems that we have a dearth of data on these issues. We keep on speculating how many people died in, war against terrorism. We still don't have the tally for how much money we have lost. Is it possible to periodically publish our data as well?
Yes, again, it's something, it's, I think, part of the retooling of the government of Pakistan for the 21st century would be more transparency on data. Because that will, the transparency on data has its own salutary effects, not only for the government itself, but also for the public at large. So it's again, I'm in this happy position of saying that our successors probably will be, in a few months' time, will be facing these challenges, and I hope they will take it up. And if the people of Pakistan...
Be very careful, you might be the successor as well.
No, and I'm saying if the people of Pakistan elect us again, it's something that we will be taking up systematically.
Yeah, but after 4.5 years, we are hearing that you will do it in the future.
No, the reason, as I say, is, the thing is, in the 4.5, well, nearly 5 years now, the challenges that we have faced were, first of all, terrorism, largely resolved, still some there. Energy shortages, both electricity and gas, largely resolved. There was this economic crisis, an investment crisis, which is partially resolved through China-Pakistan Economic Corridor.
Right.
So these are three, I think, very major achievements for an elected government to take back to the people, because in our view, it was the Pakistan drowning in blood and energy shortages that we were given by the people of Pakistan to fix. Sir, and it is largely fixed.
I totally believe what you are saying, and I'm not going to even contend. But the problem is governments are usually capable of multitasking. And while we are fighting terrorism, while we are actually trying to undercut energy shortages, we can also come up with the data, collect it, right? Didn't happen.
Well, that's another story, because the siege also continued.
Yeah.
The siege of democracy also continued.
Is it only siege, or is it siege mentality as well?
Well, siege create. I think the people of Pakistan have witnessed the first dharna back in 2014. They saw
painfully so.
This
studio was attacked.
This studio was attacked. This building was occupied. Then they also saw in 2016 an actual attack on Islamabad from the north, which was repelled, thank God. And the constant machinations that happen in this town regarding elected governments. And again, these are lessons for us to learn.
Yeah.
For example, I can tell you that because of these crises that we have faced, regarding the Panama Papers that happened and the court cases, my productivity as a minister was much more in 2016.
Okay.
And it reduced in 2017 because we were spending so much time on other things.
Why?
Because we had to face these issues as a government.
Yeah, but you are a cabinet minister, and there wasn't any case against you ever. I don't remember any of that sort. So you could have focused on your ministry.
No, we as I said, we were focusing on our ministries. But at the same time, we also had to survive as a government to be
You
able to go
did.
forward. We did. I
Yeah.
think it's again, it's something that is a good legacy to give to the next government is that we expect, inshallah, the two elected governments back to back completed their terms.
Yeah.
Elections were held on time, on a predictable schedule. I think that's very important.
That is important, but none of Pakistan's Prime Minister ever completed his term in office, and that is a big question. But I have to actually bring up two other questions that I was actually waiting to actually mention here. One, you were talking about influencing the West and elsewhere. One leverage that we have seen India uses is its military procurements, right? The weapon procurement. And it so happens everybody around us seems to be procuring something and using it to lobby people. Pakistan usually ends up on the losing side whenever it comes to banning, defense aid, similar things. Is it possible that Pakistan starts investing A, in lobbying, B, investing in weapons procurement as well? Because there was a time when India was not being, facilitated by the Americans. They went to Israel. We don't even have that kind of options, do we?
Well, that requires a country in robust economic health. It was only last year, after a decade, that we even crossed 5% growth. India has had now 7% growth for nearly 2 decades.
Now, thanks to demonetization, it has come down to 6.
Well, thanks to demonetization, but still they have grown very fast for nearly 2 decades. Something like this needs to happen in Pakistan, and that's why the siege of elected governments has to stop. There has to be an understanding that we need political stability in order to have economic stability, in order to begin to create the kind of surpluses, not only for weapons procurement, but overall to retool our armed forces. It's something, a responsibility that I'm currently holding, is to retool our armed forces. In the aftermath of Zarbe-Az, when Nadul Fasad, we have learned a great deal of lessons that now it is a two-front army.
Right.
It is no longer an army that has...
Actually, it might be three-front army because we have to talk about space as well.
Yes. So
challenges, because everybody is colonizing space.
So there are multiple challenges, but
thinking,
all these require economic surpluses.
Minister Sahab, are we thinking out of the box here? Because in the age of AI, artificial intelligence, in the age of cyber trolls actually working a lot of things that even the armies cannot, and in the age of space colonization or exploration, are we, putting the money where the mouth is?
Well, that's a challenge. We are not currently. We have what we have done is essentially we have retooled our army without retooling our doctrines.
Okay. Or imagination also?
Well, perhaps yes. Is that we were faced with this terrible enemy of violent extremism, and we had to fight it. And so we learned by doing.
Right.
Now, of course, that we have largely vanquished violent extremism. Again, there is opportunity for the armed forces, but also the civilian component to begin to think seriously about these two subjects. I talked about vastly more resources for our diplomacy and all kinds of diplomacy.
Right.
The second part is, of course, to think very hard about what kind of army do we want, how the region is changing.
Right.
And of course, we have to think about how to, as I said, recalibrate
modernize actually,
and our security and foreign policies regionally.
One last question. I'm told we are left with 4 minutes. The last question is about CPEC. Repeatedly, it seems that China's name is being used to undercut Pakistan. And how? South Asia policy, actually new national security policy of the US, mentions two challenges, Russia and China. And in that context, they say...
them revisionist powers.
Of course. And they think that Pakistan has aligned itself very aggressively with China, and that's why Pakistan needs to be punished. And many people think that this FATF matter might also relate to that too. How can we disabuse the West of this notion that somehow Pakistan has
Well,
become
I
yet another, you know.
We have been trying when we speak to our Western friends and partners on this. The simple fact is, I'll want to take you back to 2013 and 14, in which terrorism was raging. In 2012, which was the highest terrorist incidents, there was an average of 6 incidents per day for the whole year in Pakistan.
Right.
So, as I said, Pakistan was practically drowning in blood of the Pakistani people.
Right.
Similarly, terrible load shedding, 18 hours, 16 hours across the country. At that time, it was China, through creative diplomacy by then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. China was originally interested only in the corridor, the Gwadar-Kashgar corridor. So Nawaz Sharif went to the Chinese in the summer of 2013, just after. He said, you know, we are also suffering gravely from energy crisis. So we need massive investments.
Right.
And the thing is, China at that time, when most of the West was not willing to even send its people, its citizens to Pakistan, supported Pakistan.
Right.
And China has gotten what now seems to be a first mover's advantage.
Right.
And that's what we keep telling our Western friends, that at the time when you were not willing to send people, you had sent the insurance and risk premiums on Pakistan sky high.
Right.
It was the Chinese government that said, we will step in, we will support you with lower premiums. It actually encouraged their companies to invest in Pakistan. And that's what happened. So it wasn't that Pakistan deliberately chose to align itself with Chinese.
Right.
Chinese stepped in essentially as what happened was that a corridor sort of blossomed into a larger
Other projects.
economic investment. Yes.
Right. That is true. And that is precisely why China is rising as an economic power, because they know where to take risks and invest. But one has to actually ask this, because America, West somehow portrays Pakistan as one-trick pony, that maybe we will be aligned with one country and then we cannot work with others. That is not true, right?
That is absolutely not true. I think we have, I think for 7 months,
Right.
we have been very sober with the Americans. We have not been provoked, despite some very incendiary language that President Trump, Vice President Pence, Secretary Tillerson, even Secretary of Defense have used. One more time, we put Pakistan on notice.
Right.
Pakistan is deceitful,
Yeah.
billions and billions. So we want to keep engaging the Americans. It is a 70-year-old relationship, and we won't let it go very easily.
Right.
But of course, as I said, we are recalibrating not only towards China,
Right.
but also towards Russia, towards our friends in the Far East, and also, of course, in the Middle East, in which we have to rethink our policy there also.
Right. Khurram Dastgir Khan Sahab, on that, I'm told that we have run short of time. There were umpteen other questions that we wanted to ask.
We'll
and
leave
we
them
will.
to our successors.
Yeah, no, actually, I will not leave you that easily. I will invite you again and we'll try to actually get more answers. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Thank you very much for being here and your input as well.
Thank you.
Viewers, you have listened to our participant, the minister, and you have listened to an overall debate on Pakistan's national interest, Pakistan's defense policy as well. In coming days, we will discuss more and bring you more opinion as well. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching us. Take care.